Good afternoon, everyone. It's Sunday, May 18th, 2025, 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. You're watching Co-op for Two, broadcasting live from Champaign, Illinois. And you're joining me for letter 4 of a Dear Holmes play-by-mail case we've been working our way through. A little bit of a hiccup last week. I don't think we quite solved it. There's some discussion in the Discord in the intervening days, and we still do not have a great solution for this week's letter, which you'll remember is part of a series of puzzles. This is one of the first letters that Dear Holmes sent out back in 2019, I think we decidedly puzzle-based, unlike the more recent versions of letters that have been coming out, which were much more narrative deduction. We had 2 weeks where we solved the puzzles quite satisfyingly, and then we hit a bump last week. We'll discuss it a little bit, but I think we're just going to close our eyes and jump off the ledge here. But let's check in with the chat, see how everyone's doing. Tony Granite is here. I feel like some of you people have purposely got names that are odd. Not odd, but it's like it should be Granite. I guess it's my eyes going to. Looking forward to music note details. Watching Six Moons was interesting. Fascinating how you figured it out. Okay, what Tony is talking about is yesterday afternoon, we spent 2 hours with Six Moons, City of Six Moons, which is behind me here, sort of mostly off screen. A game created by aliens, in total just symbols, and we're trying to figure out the rules of the game. And it's been quite captivating. We spent 2 hours on stream, then we spent some time off stream. The Discord is very active working on it, Rob and Arsene. And I have scheduled session 2 for tonight. At 11 p.m., we will return to the world of City of Six Moons. And I will talk about some of the things that I think I figured out in the time between yesterday afternoon and today. We'll go over it. There are still some mysteries to be solved. Okay. Anything else to talk about before we jump into today's session? Any projects anyone is working on? I am play testing my third case for New York Noir. Not publicly playtesting it, just going through it myself. A little bit of tweaking to be done, but I am excited to be almost done with that case. I found a new mystery writing book that I love by Haley Ephron, I think it is. In 2 weeks, we've got this letter for Dear Holmes, and then next Sunday is the conclusion letter for Dear Holmes. The week after that, I will do on Sunday an update on New York Noir, a game design diary, and lots to talk about, lots of progress on New York Noir to talk about. I'll go over some of this. I'll go over this new book I've discovered that I really like. I'll talk about my new case, some new online tools that have been made. Lots of stuff. I hope you can join me for that in 2 weeks. Then maybe we'll do a channel update. Gen Con is coming up on August 1st. If you're going to be around Indianapolis, if you attend Gen Con, let me know. I'd love to meet up and just say hello. I am running some games of New York Noir while I'm there. If you're a viewer of this channel and you're going to be at Gen Con, let me know. I'll bring you a little Co-op for Two mug. Okay, nothing else? No other projects anyone wants to talk about? New TV, new movies, nothing like that, huh? Has anyone done the homework and watched Presumed Innocent? I know Isara said that she watched Presumed Innocent and was a little shocked by the adult nature of it. Let me I keep begging you guys to come to the channel ready to discuss your hobbies and projects, but no one ever listens to me. All right. So this is our next letter. Boy, this top-down camera is bright when it's on that view. All right, let's talk about the case. We've gotten an inheritance. We've been hired by the grandson of a man who's died and left his inheritance through a series of puzzles like a treasure hunt. And here was the letter we got last week. We had solved the mystery of the code of the grandfather clock, which told him to speak to the servants. We went to the servants' house with Watson, and they brought us down a tin fiddle. We got a little bit of a history of this tin fiddle. It was a object that the grandfather picked up in the Antipodes in Australia, we think. And the grandfather taught himself to play it and to read music. They get the fiddle, which violin, we think just another word for violin, and they look for the scratches like in the previous 2 days. No scratches, but there's a coded message inside. And here is our coded message. All right. Now, what did we do? First of all, it should be said, we basically failed to decode this. We have some ideas, but to me, it seems clear that they're incomplete. So what did we figure out? First of all, we played around for a long time with how these notes could be translated into a code. The notes here are A, B, E, D, E. Okay, A, B, E, D, E. Then on this lower, this is the treble, this is the bass, we see a C that continues and is held the whole time. And we've got 2 rests here. There are some historic codes that use musical notation. We couldn't make much heads or tails out of those. This initial part seemed more promising. And early on, we got the idea that it might be GPS coordinates. It might be longitude and latitude. And we thought maybe there was an early suggestion that we sort of locked onto. I'm a little bit nervous, actually, about that suggestion. In fact, if I had to guess, I would guess that we're wrong about that. So we sort of, the guess was this translated to something like Italian for go to or something. But it seems to me, okay, anyway, we started with go to, and then we thought, okay, what if this is latitude and longitude? And we looked it up, and the 0 is quite suspicious. And when we did look it up, after a couple of false, whatever you call that, false something, we came up with that latitude and longitude pointing to Greenwich Park in London, which is already a bit of a coincidence that it's in London. And in fact, it seems to point to the Royal Observatory Greenwich, which is exactly on this 0 meridian line. So that's a big coincidence if that's not right. And we tried to think, okay, what's going on at the Royal Observatory? There's a big clock, they're obviously observing the stars or whatever. So that felt like that might be right. Although it could be something else in the park. But because this is, if this is the longitude, if this is exactly 0 prime meridian, very suspicious. Could mean other things, though. Could mean frequency. I'll tell you what I'm nervous about with this, though. the first thing that jumps out to me to be nervous of is why is it in Italian? But the more damning thing is this A. It shouldn't be capitalized. If it's a go-to, that seems very odd to me. Now, we think that this is sort of like a notation that you would find at the top of a score, which is why it might look like this. But why it would be Italian, I don't know. Why the A would be capitalized, I don't know. So I have a feeling that although the idea of go-to might have helped us find these coordinates, which may or may not be right, I have my doubts that we're even on the right wavelength here. But we are going to pretend as if we've advised Watson to go to the Royal Observatory. I mean, it's in London, Greenwich. It's not the worst thing. Are they even in London, though? Anyway, that's where we told him to go. I'm sure we'll get an angry letter back if we've told him to go someplace wrong. Now, as far as this, we are totally flummoxed. And there's been some suggestion, like, could it mean that we're trying to meet someone named BD? To me, that can't be right. There's a bunch of reasons it can't be right. First of all, why would it start with a rest? Like A. Bede. Is this someone's name, like an Alfred Beatty or something? To me, it makes no sense. There would be no reason there would be a rest here. It doesn't make any use of this, although we were thinking the homophone, the letters C could stand for SEE, like see this person at the Royal Observatory. It doesn't make any use of this long E at the end, and this is exactly the wrong way to do a code. I would be very angry if that's the solution. If you wanted to make a puzzle where the players were supposed to figure out that they should visit Mr. someone so-and-so at this observatory, you could do that. You just have to make this a recognizable last name. Like if it said, if this spelled out, A. Smith, then when you decoded it to Smith, you'd say, oh, yes, okay, that's probably someone's last name. But you couldn't try to get people to guess that they should visit this person with a last name B-E-D and then a long E. So I feel like we're completely wrong here. And we might be completely off here. My guess is that these rests might be blanks that we are supposed to fill in. But we tried to make words of those and we couldn't. It also feels to me like the tin violin from the Antipodes should be a clue that we could use somehow. I tried using the chemical symbol, the table of elements for tin, which I think are SN, SAN, BEDE, SAN, SAN, BD. Don't know. And then there was a theory, well, maybe this is the underlying C. So there was we tried some things, like what if you added the C offset to these and maybe put in the C here? Did we try that fully? Like we tried saying that the rest were blanks, right? So if we have A blank and then B, E, D, E, we have this. We thought about, okay, maybe you put a C here. So C-A-C-B-E-D-E, that doesn't work. But what if you're supposed to add them? We tried adding C, offset of 3 to all of these. but it didn't work. But what if you put the C's in here and then you add this 3 to this? So B, C, D, that doesn't work. Yeah. Amato Rose says maybe CBD. Well, that's why I was talking about why that couldn't make sense. Like you can't expect someone to figure out a code that depends on them figuring out that the last name is BEDE. It just doesn't make sense, especially why there's the long E. This is the kind of clue that I actually tend to like, in that there are elements to this that feel like they need to have a reason. There has to be a reason there's a long E at the end. There has to be a reason that these are rests. There has to be a reason that there's a base long C here. And we have no explanation for those. So that tells me we haven't figured out how to decode it, that it's not simply that we have to visit someone named ABD. Before we open up the letter now and read it, does anyone have any ideas, insights, thoughts about, if not the solution, those elements? The long E, the bass note C, and the rests. Nelson says, we did find some stained glass about a beatty at Truro Cathedral. So if there's something related to beatty. So I suppose, first of all, was beatty at Truro Cathedral, this person, was their first name an A? Because that would be the alternative idea, that this is not latitude and longitude, but that this part was right, telling us about a famous person named Saint Bede, but this is other information. Nothing has worked, so it's simply some random guy named Bede. I'm going to bet that that's wrong. Marlene says, I'm still thinking it's a combination of sorts. So Marlene thinks it's something like a safe combination. Well, that's not really going to work. It would have to tell us where to go. All right. Well, we're just going to admit defeat here. There's only so many mysteries we can work on. I think maybe we would have focused more on this if Six Moons hadn't distracted us a little bit. But okay, let's see what happens. Now, this letter, if it's anything like the last one, is going to start out talking to us as if we sent the right information. But maybe we're supposed to think that Sherlock Holmes sent them the right answer and we sent them the wrong answer. In the stained glass, there's a reference to someone called Alcuin, but it's a different person. Okay. Before we read it, last chance here. 5148-0. What's going to be sad is if we've missed some other clues somewhere else. We did get a mention about, so it's the telegram from our boss, Clayton Notting, who we know is in on this. I notified them we're coming. The sister remained silent, seemed rather pleasantly confused, as if she were in the early stages of elderly enfeeblement. I think that's just because she knows this is a fun treasure hunt that we're engaged in. But we did have something. We were told you would visit us, only give it to you then. And then they goes back and brings down the fiddle made of tin from the Antipodes. He taught himself to play it and how to read music. He taught himself how to read music. Okay, let's read it. Here we go. This is kind of exciting because I'm curious to see what the solution is going to be and whether we're going to find it satisfying, if it's going to be sad that we didn't stick with it and figure it out, or if we're going to be happy that we gave up when we did. The only really interesting debate here is those of you who think that we're just going to visit someone named A. Beatty at the observatory, and those of you like me that think it must be something deeper. Here we go. Holmes, I have much to report, as events have crowded fast and thick upon us. By now, Baron Maupertuis castles have started to crumble, and more than one man across London is pondering the inexorable fate tied to his own associated corruption that is trundling his way. Only moments ago I received a message from Lestrade that Sir Martin Roper has shot himself, most certainly related to his previous unwavering support of the Baron. It is likely that other solitary engineered solutions will follow. That's references to other Sherlock Holmes cases. In the meantime, I will take a moment to relate the latest in the Polmain matter. Your wire with the solution to the code of the music staff was most instructive. You will be happy to learn I had actually puzzled out a piece of it myself, realizing that our next journey would be to the Royal Observatory at Greenwich, and to the Prime Meridian, although until your clarifying telegram stating to go there and see A. Bede, I had no idea to proceed. So we were 100% right in our decoding guess. See someone named A. Bede at the Royal Observatory. We actually got it right. I just did not buy that that was going to be a valid conclusion. How about that? We actually got the third cipher. Okay, well, you've heard my complaints about why that was a badly designed puzzle. We don't need to beat a dead horse. Polmain and I made our way east and across the river, arriving mid-morning. The blue sky illuminated the impressive buildings of the Royal Naval College, and once again I found I can never go there without recalling so much of the proud history of our empire. Our carriage made its way up the hill, with the parkland dropping away from us and London shining in the distance across the river. The beauty of the morning, however, was in direct contrast with young Edward's mood. He had initially been happy and then intrigued by the solution to the latest of grandfather's messages, but he feared our destination would simply reveal another puzzle, and I began to absorb much of his mood as well, when a full realization of how little time was left recalled itself to me, for the deadline is tomorrow. We reached the top of the hill and stepped to the ground. It was then that I saw something which I must relate to you, Holmes, although it has nothing to do with the current matter. Across the way, having an intense conversation with Sir Pelton of the observatory, was a certain mathematical professor of our acquaintance. He didn't see me, and to Edward's surprise, I took him by the arm and pulled him quickly into a nearby building. Although whatever business Moriarty was on certainly had no intersection with mine, I knew that it wouldn't do for me to be seen. I would have dearly loved to determine just what his game was, but there was simply no way to get closer and eavesdrop. I had to watch in frustration, as through rippled glass of the old window. I saw him enter his own coach and slowly depart down the hill. Edward was still puzzled, but he quickly forgot when I asked a passing chap if he could direct us to A. Bede. Without a question or comment, we were led through a series of hallways to a small door on the south of the building. It was marked modestly with the legend, Albert Bede. A knock brought forth a call to enter, and we opened the door to discover a portly gentleman, clearly in his 8th decade. He looked up puzzled for a moment, and then he seemed to recognize Edward, and a wide smile broadened his face. "So you found me, then," he chortled. He invited us to sit and then looked questioningly in my direction. Edward was tongue-tied, so I introduced us both, explaining our mission. Bede replied, "Nothing against seeking help. In fact, that's a sign of intelligence, if you ask me." Edward seemed puzzled, and the old man continued, "Well, your grandfather and I were great friends. When he set this quest before you, I asked if I would be a part of it. He asked if I would be a part of it, and I said, 'My pleasure, my pleasure.'" Edward's eyes widened, and he seemed to straddle both hope and despair. "Please, sir," he managed to say, "tell me what you must, and pray that it isn't another one of these dreadful puzzles." Bede laughed and slapped his desk. "I imagine that one would weary of them," he said, "and that's a fact. Well, not far to go now. You only have one more task, to travel back to Notting's office and tell him just one word: Truro." Edward raised his eyebrows, and then, after a long pause, said, "And then?" The old man shrugged. "Success. Satisfaction, I suppose. Then, after all is said and done, it will be up to you, my boy, to determine just how your life will play out. I wish you well. Come back and tell me about it sometime." And so we soon found ourselves in Lincoln's Inn Fields, and sitting before Notting's desk. He smiled knowingly and placed 2 documents before him on the desk. "Here," he said, tapping the one on the right, "is the will giving your grandfather's estate to the Truro Cathedral, provided you could not solve his tests. And this," he said, putting a finger on the document on the left, "is another document, carefully dated after the first, giving the estate to you." "So," I asked, "am I to understand that the estate went to Edward in its entirety regardless?" "The latter will supersedes the first, whether or not he solved the puzzles." "Oh, it does. I convinced Martin that his puzzle game was both unfair and probably wouldn't stand up to legal challenge. In fact, I had some ethical concerns about even making myself part of it. But Martin left specific instructions that the quest should be carried out nonetheless, in order to see if Edward had the gumption to work it out for himself." He smiled fondly at the young man. "I was against it, but at the same time, I could see your grandfather's point of view. And you did it, my boy. Congratulations." Edward seemed rather stunned. Then he finally spoke. "I'm not sure that I did it, actually. I had the help of Dr. Watson, and through him, Mr. Sherlock Holmes, who guided us from the continent, where he's currently involved in another investigation." "Indeed," said Notting. "I thought that Dr. Watson seemed familiar. I've been following Mr. Holmes' activities in the newspapers. Why, the news has just broken that Baron Maupertus has been arrested in Lyon. As a matter of fact, he was attempting to flee when the Surete frustrated him, so to speak." It was my turn to be surprised. "I haven't even heard that news yet," I said. I turned to Edward. "I'm very glad that all has worked out for the best, and you must come and tell me what happens next. Besides, I know we both want to know how Holmes solved these various coded messages, but for now I must depart. My help will be needed elsewhere." I shook hands with both of them and rapidly made my way home, where I now await your instructions. To fill the time, I'm writing this to record as much as possible, and I'll send by way of the same messengers that we have so recently used. In the meantime, many congratulations, my friend, on yet another victory. So that's very interesting, the structure of this case. There is another letter, which I assumed was going to be the wrap-up. But it looks like the structure of this set of letters is going to be that the case has ended now on the first. Remember, Dear Holmes was still getting their footing and figuring out how to do these. It seems like the idea now is that this is the end of the case. And then the final letter is going to be explaining how each of the puzzles was solved, because while we were playing, it didn't tell us how to solve them. We figured it out, but it told us the same solution we had concluded. So we broke this code and concluded it was Ask the Hayes, and then on our next letter, Holmes just told them to ask that you should ask the Hayes. But Holmes didn't explain how he decoded it, which we figured out. So I guess that in our fourth and final letter, it's just going to be solutions to each of these ciphers. Whether there's going to be any narrative to it, I don't know. So it's quite fascinating to me that we got this exactly right. I just really did not believe that that was going to be a good answer to that puzzle. Well, it's a good thing we didn't try to go deeper into that rabbit hole. So, in case you forgot, the reason that it's talking about the Truro Cathedral that Nelson was talking about is we were told that in the very beginning of the case, that if he doesn't solve it in time, the will is going to leave all the money to the Truro Cathedral. So that's why Nelson was smart enough to go back to that mention. Game over. No puzzle for us until next week. Next letter will just be Holmes' final solution. Maybe you should read the fifth letter today. There's nothing for us to think about until next week. Yeah, I think we should just read the fifth letter today. If we had spent an hour recapping, then maybe I wouldn't. But since it's just going to be a solution, and since we already know the solutions, since we solved them all ourselves, it seems like we should just go ahead and read the solution. All right, let's go ahead and do that. I can see I'm going to have to turn down this light a little bit. All right, so we are going to go ahead and read the fifth letter. Remember that Dear Holmes has moved to only using 4 letters from now on. But this was the olden days of Dear Holmes when there were 5 letters. All right, so let's see what we've got here. We think this is just going to be how the 3 codes were solved. Okay. The reason we'll have to... Okay, it is from Sherlock Holmes with his old letterhead. 14th of April, after the case has ended. My dear Watson, I write these lines courtesy of Baron Maupertus. who thankfully bolted prematurely, thus acknowledging his guilt and placing him in the sure hands of the French police. His scheming is at an end, although I fear that the reverberations will ring for quite some time as the rot we uncovered is rooted out, to mix my metaphors. While I enjoy my well-earned relaxation and every comfort that the Hotel Dulong can supply, I will take a moment to reply to your most recent letter and explain my solutions to the various puzzles in relation to your acquaintance Edward Polmain and his inheritance. The insight into the initial message being related to the stairway and the subsequent discovery of the new carvings upon the stair risers was quite useful, as it gave me an indication into the thinking of Mr. Martin Polmain. I pondered over the various meanings of the curious line figures, even for a moment considering some obscure variant of the Ogham language. Then I considered the arrangement on the rising and subsequent steps, and it occurred to me to rotate the sketch 90 degrees clockwise, to view it the way one tilts one's head to read titles on the spines of books, lined up across a shelf. You had presented the carvings in your letter in reverse order, with the top step copied first and so on to the bottom, when in fact the first carving that you drew should have been presented on the left, at the beginning of the message, which actually records lines of text. Removing the separating spaces between the carvings necessitated by the physical placement of the stair treads revealed something like this. And filling in the edges produced something more legible, as well as using a great deal of my ink. This, with some imagination, can be read as Tempus Fugati Magna Fortuna. I am uncertain of my Latin to know if this is the correct form, but it is what Martin Polmain intended. Time flies, great fortune. It might have been simply a warning that the puzzle had a limited time to be solved, but if so, that wouldn't advance young Edward a single jot toward the solution. Thus I chose to take time more literally, and recalled the great clock which you had described in the otherwise mostly emptied house. Following my advice, you examined the clock and sent me the curious message made up of O's, C's, X's, V's, and I's. After consideration, I realized that, except for the O's and C's, the other letters were those used as the basic units for smaller Roman numerals. Specifically, these numbers were connected with the numbers associated with clocks and telling time, I for 1, 2 I's for 2, and so on. After the AM, or daytime 12-hour period, the numbers start over at night, running from 1 to 12 again, or I to XII. This, of course, gives us 24 time periods, a number which is close to the 26 in the alphabet. This realization gave me the suspicion that this was simply a substitution code, but then what did the O's and C's mean? Suddenly it was so simple. The O represented the sun or day, and the first 12 time periods, or the first 12 letters of the alphabet. The C was then the moon, or the second 12 time periods, and naturally the 13th through 24th letters of the alphabet. With that in mind, the code becomes this. Okay, which is what we figured out. Presumably, if the 25th and 26th letter of the alphabet, Y and Z, were needed, they could be written as shown, which I worked out from the message itself or in some similar way. Using this, I saw that the O's and C's served as natural breaks to indicate where each letter began, thus the coded message was easily deciphered as "Ask the Haze." The musical clue was quite easily explained. The notation at the top was possibly placed there to imply, for someone who didn't know better, some sort of tempo marking or instruction to the player. However, the Italian phrase via V, loosely translated as go to, followed by a series of numbers that could very well be coordinates. Latitude 51.48 and longitude 0 could only lead to just a pair of places on Earth. And since you didn't need to go to the ocean between Cape Town and Antarctica, it must mean the prime meridian at Royal Observatory at Greenwich. My congratulations upon also proceeding this. The musical composition was quite straightforward as well. The first note to sound, a whole note C in the bass clef, is solitary by means of the quarter rest above it. It is held throughout the two-measure piece, tied to a similar C in the second measure. In the treble clef, the quarter rest is then followed by an A, then another quarter rest implying a space and indicating that the A stands alone, before the notes B, E, D, and E are indicated. With these various pieces identified, the message clearly reads, go to 51.480 C A bead. While all of this was an elementary child's play of deduction, it did serve as a much-needed distraction from the cut and parry work as the Baron attempted to squirm out of the trap, and for that I'm grateful. I appreciate your letter telling me of the happy ending of the affair. Now, I find myself quite weary. I cannot make the staff here at the hotel understand just what kind of tobacco that I desire, and the knocking upon my door by various officials who either want to ask questions or congratulate me is becoming quite tiresome. I believe I will save this letter to deliver personally into your hands and send a wire inviting you to join me here. Assuming that you accept, I look forward to your arrival, Watson, but for now I believe that I will attempt to sleep. With very best regards, S. Holmes. So there you have it. We did figure out all three puzzles, although that last one I am still not happy about, but I've explained why. I think there's lots of details that are wrong about, that are badly designed about this puzzle, but I actually had a lot of fun on the clock cipher. And if you watch that live stream, I think that's a perfect example of the kind of decryption that one can hope for in a puzzle where you're trying to identify characteristics that help you decode it. All right, so what I'm curious about is what those of you who have been joining me for these Dear Holmes letters, how many have we played now? Maybe a dozen? Maybe not quite a dozen? Rob has helped me make up a spreadsheet, so I actually could bring up the spreadsheet. Let's see here. So we have a spreadsheet of all the Dear Holmes cases, and then we've got when we've played them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Okay, so we've played 13 cases. Rob says this makes number 14. So we've played over a year's worth of cases every Sunday. Is that right? Taking short Sundays off for channel updates and game design diaries. We've been now doing this every Sunday for a year. It is amazing how fast time flies. So my question to you is, we've now gotten a peek at the very early days of Dear Holmes. And what I want to know is where you would rank this one among the others. It's quite different in terms of the structure of it, especially with the solution coming as a sort of extra letter that we didn't really need. So what do you think of the structure? Are you glad they moved to the more deductive elements? Do you prefer a puzzle game? This is sort of, now we've seen Dear Holmes eat both as a puzzle game and as a deductive mystery. Any thoughts from the channel where you would rank this? Do you prefer this over the mysteries when the mysteries are crazy? Rob says, this case feels more like an escape room game, puzzles with the narrative slapped on. The newer style is much better. Okay, Derek wants to talk about the next game, but we're talking about this game first. We're not going to be playing Deadbolt tonight because we're going to be doing a City of Six Moons discussion tonight at 11 p.m. You could, if you want to join me for that, you might watch yesterday's session. Tony Grant says, I prefer the deductive narrative. Nelson says, I also prefer the real deduction rather than a narrative puzzle game. Marlene says, I would put this in the bottom third. Puzzles were part of the story only to continue the story. I prefer deductive. Well, okay, so everyone prefers the new format. I guess, I mean, I do as well. But in fairness, I think two things have to be said. First thing is that because of the structure of our weekly sessions and what our expectations were, this didn't quite fit in well to that. In terms of a puzzle game, though, like decoding a cipher, we've seen like ciphers and codes in games, and they don't have any narrative to them. This is like, if you really do care about, if you do want narrative with your puzzles, we did get some good, we did get a fun narrative for a puzzle game. For a deductive game, it was not heavy on narrative, but for a puzzle game, it was heavy on narrative. And I do like the idea of getting a week to work on a puzzle. Now, as far as the 3 puzzles in this game, I would say the middle one with the clock was really good, was very satisfying, maybe because we attacked it well, but I found it very satisfying. The 2 ending puzzles I thought were not so great. The first one was a visual one, which would have been fine, except for it required Latin. I guess we could figure it out enough that we could tell it was right, and we could have just looked it up if we didn't know Latin, but luckily someone in the channel figured out it was Latin. The last puzzle, I think, was terribly designed, ambiguous, and didn't have the flavor of knowing when you got it right. So 1 out of 3 puzzles I thought were good here, but that one was, you know, up there with my top ciphers we've solved. So I guess I would put this on the bottom of my Dear Holmes games as well. Certainly right there near the bottom, but not because it was bad, just because it's not quite what we were wanting. So a reminder that Dear Holmes is one of the few play-by-mail mystery games that are currently extant, that exist. You can subscribe to Dear Holmes yourself and become, it's not cheap, but it is quite special to get something in the mail. This letter is part of what they call their practice club, which is sending out the old letters. So right now we're on 2 tracks. We have new letters coming in and old letters coming in. You might want to consider subscribing if you want to support this work. Having lost one of the few play-by-mail companies, Murders by Mail, I am keen to want these companies to survive. This is one of my favorite formats, the play-by-mail stuff. So if this interests you, especially giving a gift to someone of a play-by-mail subscription, you might want to consider subscribing to Dear Holmes, maybe as a gift. I have no relationship with the publisher. I don't get anything if you subscribe. And as I said, I do consider it still pretty expensive. But you'll forgive me for taking this moment to thank the Patreon supporters of this channel. Without you, I would not be able to afford to buy all of these, subscribe to both the current and the past cases from Dear Holmes. But that does lead me to the question of whether we should alternate between playing the oldest cases and the newest cases, or if we should keep exploring the older cases. Are they all going to be puzzles? Did Dear Holmes experiment with different formats? We really don't know. But we are not going to start a new case next week. Next week, I don't know what we'll do. The week after, which is June 1st, I believe, which will be around Memorial Day, I think, will be a game design diary update. That'll be in 2 weeks. So it's possible that next week I'll do a channel update, or we'll do something special Sunday afternoon, but we will not start a new Dear Holmes case. Let me know if you have some ideas for what you'd like to do next week. It was fun trying an older case. I hope the rest of the older cases change the current style. Maureen says, I think the game would have been better if even an off reference to Bede was in a previous letter. Yeah, they needed to have done something different with that name. It could have been a real person, which I don't think it was, or it could have referenced someone earlier, or it could have been more clearly a name. All right. I'm looking forward to tonight's session, going over City of Six Moons, the new stuff I've picked up. If you're curious, you can watch yesterday's live session and join me again tonight to go over that. Anything else to talk about before we wrap this up? As I said, we still have to figure out what to do next Sunday. So if you have some ideas for what you'd like to play next Sunday afternoon at 1 p.m., you can stop by the Board Game Geek Guild for this channel, post it there, or the Discord. Let it be known there. Do consider becoming a Patreon supporter if you enjoy this content, or subscribe and hit a thumbs up on this video if you want to see more videos like this. Joe J. Anderson says maybe a Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective fan case next week, or Suzaku Part 3. I absolutely want to play more Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective fan case. I also want to play the last case from West End Adventures, which we haven't played yet. I'm hoping to play that soon. I think sometime this week would be the right way to go. I'm also getting a little bit of an itch to play another of those 4 Masters of Crime games. But it's possible that what we'd be better off doing next Sunday is a channel update. So I'll give that some thought. All right, for those of you who have joined me for the last month of Dear Holmes, it was fun, it was enjoyable, and it was a real team effort. I appreciate your help. I'll see you this week.